ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך רם ונישא, אדון עולמים.
מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים.
ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. אדוני, אדוני, רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים, ורב חסד ואמת, נוטל חסד לא אלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטאה ונקה.
Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo, Gadlul Adonai iti, Unerobema Shemo Yachdav. Lecha
Adonai hagedula v'hagivura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'yanit na'aseh lechol erosh. Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho romemu. Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Please be seated. So thank you for the virtual touching of Torah as we keep a distance and keep safe. I agree. So we are in a special Torah portion, obviously, for the first day of Sukkot. It comes really from Parashat Emor. It comes from the portion right after the Holiness Code of Kedoshim, where God is still articulating certain laws and commandments that are very Israelite community specific, including how they should observe the festivals and what should be done. And this is it's 10 verses only, if I'm correct, in terms of the Torah portion this morning. It's a very short Torah portion dealing with specifically the laws concerning Sukkot being a seventh-day festival. Even though it mentions an eighth day, it does not really qualify it. And Shmini Atzeret, as we will discuss next week, is this unusual kind of addition holiday. It's not a part of Sukkot. It's a separate chag. It's a separate kind of convocation of the people. And there's a great midrash that you have an eighth day after, like a tag on to Sukkot, because why shouldn't we just increase our celebration and just increase joy for yet another day? It's kind of like having a second day birthday or anniversary, not such a bad thing. And so the cantor will be chanting from Leviticus, and I believe it's chapter 23, verses 33.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. And we thought that it would be a wonderful experience for everyone who is able, who is here present, and those who are online, but those here particularly in person, to stand up and let us do this bracha together. Whereas we have one voice, it's not going to be dissonant, it's not going to sound choppy, it's going to sound magnificent. So if we could do
but no pressure.
No pressure, no pressure, no pressure. So if we kind of on the count of three, 1, 2, 3. Baruch hu et Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor. B'chamisha asar yom lachodesh hashvi'i hazeh Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim Ladonai Bayom Harishon Mikra Kodesh Kol Melechet Avodah Lo Ta'asu Shivat Yamim Takrivu Ishe Ladonai Bayom Hashmini Mikra Kodesh Yelachem Vehikravtem Ishe Ladonai Atzeret Yi Kol Melechet Avodah Lo Ta'asu Ele Moadei Adonai Asher Tikra'u Otam Mikrae Kodesh Lehakriv Ishe Ladonai Ola Umincha Zevach Unsachim Devar Yom Beyomo Milvad Shabbatot Adonai Umilvad Matnotechem Umilvad Kol Nidrechem Umilvad Kol Nidvotechem Asher Titenu Ladonai Ach, B'chamisha Asar Yom Lachodesh Hashvi'i Be'aspechem et Tvu'at Haaretz Tachogu et Chag Adonai Shivat Yamim Bayom Harishon Shabbaton Uvayom Hashmini Shabbaton Ulkachtem Lelachem Bayom Ri Harishon Peri Eitz Hadar Kapot Hatemarim Ve'anaf Etz Avot V'arvei Nachal Usmachtem Lifnei Adonai Elohechem Shivat Yamim Behagotem Oto Chag Ladonai Shivat Yamim Bashana חוקת עולם לדורותיכם, בחודש השביעי תחוגו אותו. בסוכות תשבו 7 ימים, כל האזרח בישראל ישבו בסוכות. למען ידעו דורותיכם כי בסוכות הושבתי את בני ישראל בהוציא אותם מארץ מצרים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
יישר כוח. Together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Please be seated. So in that brief section is kind of the cliff notes of everything you want to know about Sukkot. It talks about it being a 7-day festival. It tells us that we are supposed to have the ingathering of our crops, the harvest season. It tells us that we are to take the willow, the palm branch, the myrtle, and put them together and to celebrate and be joyful in front of God. It tells us that every citizen, Kol Ezrach Yisrael, every citizen of Israel is to be one to observe this festival when they enter the land. And there's always that reminder that's kind of like that automatic tagline. And just remember, I brought you out of Egypt and you came from Egypt and you now celebrate that freedom. So it's a super passage in terms of how do we learn about Sukkot. So we take a moment in our service as we are grateful for our lives and grateful for our health, to think of those that we are thinking of this day that perhaps is not feeling so well, spiritually, physically, relationship-wise, and needs some healing. And so as we will sing the cantor setting of Mishaberach, I'm going to actually, for the first time, you're going to be able to say these names in the presence of others, to share those names and to say them either quietly to yourselves or out loud, whatever you're comfortable with.
משברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב, משברך אמותינו שרה רבקה לאה ורחל, הוא יברך את החולים וישלח להם רפואה שלמה. Sara Rivka Lea ורחל הוא יברך את החולים וישלח להם רפואה שלמה רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף רפואה רפואה שלמה רפואה רפואה שלמה ונאמר
As we continue on page 246 in our Sidurim, invite you to rise for lifting Hagba, our Sefer Torah, page 510 in the other Sidur. V'zota Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Please be seated. COVID absolutely challenges us in unique ways to lift Torah, address it all by yourself. So thank you, Cantor. So the Haftarah portion for this first day of Sukkot comes from a prophet we don't hear that often, which is Zechariah. And Zechariah lived after the exile of the first temple and of the first destruction. And he kind of was during that Persian period. And he kind of created a vision of what the world could be like in greater perfection. It has the phrase in it that we all know, that we all sing after the Aleinu, which is an aspirational, also futuristic prayer. Aleinu doesn't mean the here and now, it's about what the future could be. The Bayom Hahu verse is found in this portion of Zechariah. And there is also mention of Sukkot and the fact that in time, not just the Israelites, but all nations will make pilgrimage to Israel, to Jerusalem, for a festival of Thanksgiving. So the cantor is going to chant the brachot, and I'm going to actually read in the English.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hanemarim bemet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei hamet v'tzedek.
There shall be an endless day, its timing known only to God, neither day nor night. At evening time it shall be light. And on that day the living water shall go forth from Yerushalayim, one half to the eastern sea, the other half to the western sea. This shall happen in the summer and the winter. And the Eternal shall reign over all the earth. On that day the Eternal shall be one and known to be one. And the survivors of all the nations who came against Yerushalayim year by year shall go up to worship the sovereign God of heaven's hosts and celebrate the festival of Sukkot. But whoever from among the families of the earth does not go up to Yerushalayim to worship the sovereign God of heaven's hosts shall have no rain. And if the family of Egypt does not go up, shall it not be struck by the same plague that shall strike the other nations that do not go up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot? Such shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the nations that do not go up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. On that day the bells of the horses shall have holy to the Eternal on them, and the pots in the house of the Eternal shall be like the basins before the altar. And every pot in Yerushalayim and every in Judah shall be holy to the God of heaven's hosts. Then all who sacrifice shall come and take of them and boil their sacrifices in them. And on that day there shall no longer be any traitors in the house of the God of heaven's hosts.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzaddik b'chol hadorot האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה ועל יום חג הסוכות הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לששון ולשמחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת וישראל והזמנים.
Amen. Just as an aside, the reference to Egypt, why Egypt gets picked on here is because Egypt kind of went along with Babylon and was one of the co-enemies of Israel during the destruction. So they're not going to get away clean. We continue on page 250, page 514, Yehallelu et Shem Adonai, as we return the Sefer Torah, which symbolically, but let us rise and let us do so with honor.
יהללו את שם אדוני כי נשגב שמו לבדו הודו על ארץ ושמיים וירם קרן לעמו תהילה לכל חסידיו לבני ישראל עם קרובו הללויה הללויה כי לכך טוב נתתי לכם תורתי אל תעזובו עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם.
We continue on page 322 with Aleinu. It's interesting that in the larger Siddur, it's on page 586. I find that very, very prophetic that the Aleinu, which is this prayer about hope and wonder in the future and God's oneness, is found on the page in the larger Siddur on the same date that the first temple was destroyed. I just find that an interesting coincidence, and I'm not sure if it was a coincidence. And so, page 322.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. On page 328, page 592. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. And so on this Shabbat, this first day of Chag, we recall those whose lives walked beside us, those whose names are inscribed on our pages of memorial, and those that remain forever inscribed upon each one of our hearts. And so if the name of a loved one is on our lists, if you're comfortable, I invite you to rise when those names are called. During this period of Shiva, we remember the life of Meta Bronstein Feldman, the mother of Ellen Steckler, John. And during this period of Shloshim, Milton Steer, Barbara Schlein Silverman, James Cunin, Edith Myers, Dr. Michael Scher, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And in this year, Shirley Altabet, Norman Daniel Alvey, Sarah Ruby Lieberman Asher, Arthur Barr, Wendy Bill, Carol Brecker, Peter Douglas, Barry Elisaphan, Sylvia Fields, Rose Friedman, Haskell Gottesman, Linda Heller, Suki Hockman, Barbara Cantor, Yetta Krieger, Larry Kushner, Ruth Lasser, Marilyn Levine, Edward McDowell, Seymour Orenstein, Sidel Ornstein, Shirley Pleater, Flora Rabin, Wilma Roberts, Jerome Rockoff, Arthur Samuels, Larry Schechter, Myrna Schloss, Nathan Solinsky, Louise Stern, Dr. Joseph Tamanya, Edgar Wharton, and Jules Zimmerman. And on their yahrzeit, we recall these loved ones as well. Rose Amato, Tilly Antovel, Gussie Berlin, Joseph Bierman, George Blake, Samuel Bloom, Sidney Bauer, Alfred E. Braun, Janet B. Friedman, Alex Z. Friedman, Samuel W. Friedman, Louise Gerber, Moses H. Grant, Herbert L. Henschel, Edgar J. Cates, George W. Coles, Dorothy Kramer, Sarah Kranz, Roberta Kravitz, Ruth Lazar, Elizabeth Levine, Samuel Margolis, Alex Messenger, Tony Meyer, Herbert M. Palmer, Nathan Rich, David Scharf, Dorothy Weinberger, Laura Weingast Neratko, Renee Lambert Weitzner, Lila Westerman, and Belle Vall. Are there others whose names are remembered today? Zichronam livracha, may each one be remembered for blessing as we rise as a kehillah, as a congregation, as we recite the words of Kaddish Yatom together on page 334, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divarach hirutei v'almich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedachol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha v'chu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Huya aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael b'meru. Amen. May the source of peace and healing bring comfort to each one here who mourns and be with you always.
Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen.
Please be seated. We hope that everybody enjoys Sukkot during the next days. Anita, if people wish to kind of bring something and eat in the sukkah one day, can they do that if they call and make a reservation? Okay, so if you want to come and do that, we can only have like one family at a time, but if you'd like to do that, we can kind of make that happen so that we can have Sukkot. Next Friday, we have Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah services, and they will be online. There will be a consecration of our religious school students, an important tradition of this congregation, and that will happen in person on campus for those families only. And then Saturday, we have Torah study, and we have the final day of Shmini Atzeret services with Yiskor. Andrew, are we doing it here? Are we doing it live? Or are we going to camp? Anita, what's our thinking?
I suppose we could reconsider considering today, but we were going to do it as a stream service from our sanctuary.
We're going to do it as a stream service. Okay. So we conclude Cantor
with turn, turn, turn. One more time. We only get really one time of year that this is appropriate. These words from Ecclesiastes and a couple of words from Pete Seeger at the very end. It's on page
464.
Yep.
To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, 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 and there is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time of love, a time of hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven.
Adonai, our God, we have seen many times of hate, many times of war, many times of strife. Oh God, may this season and this festival of Sukkot, this season of thanksgiving, open our eyes and hearts to create times of peace, times of wholeness, times of gifting others with blessing. Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shalom, and may you spread over us your shelter of peace this day and each day, as we say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. And for the first time in a long time, thank you all for being here.
Yes.